podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. You are listening to Good Brothers. Thank you for joining us. Please enjoy the show. Peace. Peace.
Peace. What's happening, my brother?
Man, the air is green for the first time in 2 weeks or something. So I am in as jovial mood you could be on a September rainy, cloudy day. Man, so we're gonna get into a couple things today. I'm gonna start though with for the last 2 weeks we've been basically in a cloud of smoke here where I live locally, which is west of the city in Beaverton. And basically in a sense, there was already fires happening. Just to give folks some context, I don't know folks that don't live in Western states or states that are, commonly have wildfires and kind of know how this all goes down. There's always a fire somewhere. Like it's a nature thing on one level. There's always a fire somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Some of them are started by people being careless, and there's a great many that are started by lightning and started by other natural things. Lightning being one of the biggest. But what happened is, and if anyone saw, there was a weather dip where cold air shot down the Rockies, and like Denver was like, oh, it's 90 degrees, and the next day it was going to be 30 something in snow. Well, the other part of that weather system, and for y'all that don't know how weather systems work, I need y'all to get out there and do a little study on the water cycle and the way the air and currents move and the things. But basically,
well, just let me just state this just for the record. Much like civics that we learn that we're allowed to fail and never learn, we're also allowed to fail any class that actually has to do with meteorology, how the water cycle works, and how weather actually comes to be once you get past 4th grade. I just want to state
that. And that's a big part of why folks don't understand what's happening, right? And so normally here, so Oregon is the places in Oregon that you probably most prominently know about are the places in the Willamette Valley, which is where Portland is, at the top, of the river, of the northernest most part of Oregon, or northernest part of this part of Oregon. I guess there's a little bit more north, where the Willamette River meets the Columbia River. But the Willamette River goes all the way down into the middle and the central of Oregon. Then you get that same valley goes to like Eugene, where the Oregon Ducks are. You know what I'm saying? For everybody knows the football and the Ducks and the cool uniforms. You know what I'm saying? Nice, fantastic basketball arena. And that part of Oregon is very lush and green. There's 2 mountain ranges. There's a coastal mountain range, and then there's the Cascades, and this being traditional lands of a great many nations of of indigenous people. I can't run them all down in the way that we do when we giving props, and thanks and what have you at public meetings and such. But I was love to like the Warm Springs, the Grand Ronde nations, the Umatilla, the the other side of the river, the Yakima, and there's a whole lot of folks, and I don't want to leave nobody out by my.
You wouldn't try to leave nobody like a hip hop. What's the name? Like the end of the insert of a record label. We try to leave nobody out.
Yeah, so I don't want to mess it up. But
the whole crew.
Yeah, but this is us folks that are residing in their ancestral lands. Is a valley that is green and trees, and then you go east of the mountains. It's markedly drier, and then it's like high desert kind of conditions, and there's a part of it that's like super high desert where it's like like salt flats and all that when you get deep in the southeast, what is now called Oregon. So in the mountains generally, you get these fires. It's a part of all over the West, and then like I said, most of the country actually fires and wildfires are actually also, there's a lot of traditional knowledge by speaking of indigenous nations all across the Americas around using fire for land management and other things. So, and I want to make sure that's on the record because there's an article I'll share in the notes that speaks to, doesn't totally speak to that in the way that other places I've gone, other times I've had the experience people speak to that some burning of the land and some allowing, if it's not going to harm where people live, let the fire do what it got to do so that you don't have so much buildup of fuel. So back to the weather. So when that abrupt weather change happens, instead of the winds blowing west out of the ocean that are usually, have more moisture and are, a little less, violent, the wind went from the east to the west with hot, dry air and at high speed. And it basically blew fires that were up in some of the mountain ranges east at high speed, and since it's August and August, first week of September, which is the driest part of the year here, places are basically, anything could start a fire. I was up, unfortunately, for the great folks at Brighton Bush. One love to them. I'll put a link in if you want to support them getting their worker collective up and running again. We was up there the weekend before all this started, and if one of the fires, which was the Beachy Creek fire, was burning, and a couple of the days we were there, you could smell some of the smoke because it blow down, up the mountain or whatever. And when the wind changed, it blew the fire directly towards the town of Detroit, the town of Mill City, a couple other places that are along the road to get there. And much love to those folks and those that are suffering. And if you can donate something, so folks can rebuild their lives, I'll see if I can find some links where folks can do that. But guys, like, it's a real, like on TV, I don't know what it looks like when fire smoke happens, or when a wildfire happens. And then you remember as a kid, they would have the Smokey the Bear. Only you could prevent wildfires, forest fires. And I used to know it from the Pine Barrens context in New Jersey. At least when I was little, like Cub Scouts and stuff. Because every once in a while, I think once we had some kind of Cub Scouts something, and it was canceled because it was fires. But most years, there's no fires that get close to like large population centers or cities or even reasonably large towns. But it happened so fast. Like, we got back to our home like 4:45 in the afternoon on that Monday. And we was just like, oh man, all right, and it's like, it was getting a little windy. I was like, oh man, it's wind. I was like, yeah, it's supposed to be ill wind change and da da da. And next thing I know, it's like the sky color changed and the wind was like 50-mile-an-hour gusts. And I'm like, oh, what is so I go to look, find out what's happening. Like, with this wind change, and suddenly, basically, where we was at, the folks there that were staying had to be evacuated. And within 24 hours, it was like towns on fire, valleys on fire, the whole 9 yards. And it's and I know last year that the I don't know if they call it the Paradise Fire, but the town in California that that burned down. Like, when I would see them stupid memes and they really use some space weapon or some bullshit like that, it infuriates me, because I'm like, you dummies, if you It's not cool. It's just not cool. Like people really lose everything they had, and you making a damn meme to get people to click on something. It really pisses me off.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to two of the points, right? Of number one, we fail civics. Number two, we fail science, right? So you can't imagine that there are actually natural factors that create a situation and have a fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you think that somebody was smoking a doobie in the park, or somebody had a marshmallow campfire and caused this, right? So number one, you think that. Number two, you don't recognize that due to America being a different, being, in any other place, America really would be a lot of different countries, right? And I think sometimes it's important that we remember that, because it has a lot of different landscapes, a lot of different terrains, right? So you may be in a place that has an entirely different terrain than even the part of your state, right? To say nothing of, are you part of a place like California, which is could be a country in itself by land mass as well as by population, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our failings around both of those things, and I want to say our failing around people understanding the role of the federal government, makes us make memes about things that are a failure and breakdown of our society in actuality. Right? And so, because as I'm looking and watching it, right, obviously, number one, again, I want to send my respect and, just positive thoughts. And again, so even talking about contributing, I think that's a good point. You might have to do that, like, to everyone impacted in a real way by these situations, especially given kind of the landscape of what I am going to say is the undeniable impact of climate change. Although we acknowledge that these are natural things that are occurring. But
I mean, and it's the intensity, because it's well documented, and I can speak from even traveling. If you travel between here and California in the summer, at some point you're going to be somewhere where you smell smoke, even though you don't see a fire, right? Because that's part of the ecology. It's part of what's happening here. You know what I'm saying? Even there's years where the fires up off like Hudson Bay, you know what I'm saying, have blown smoke down here. You know what I'm saying? We don't make that linkage because we act like, these imaginary lines that make state boundaries are something that the weather gives a damn about. But you know what I'm saying? Like, so, when you learn that, but it's times like even last summer we went down with some team from work to a conference in Sacramento, and on the way back near Redding, I think we stopped to get food, and the sky, it wasn't super thick, but the sky was a little orange, and I could smell the smoke. You know what I'm saying? It's a thing that happens, but you didn't get though where it's like, it's a catastrophic, unbelievable, like 1 million acres have burned since in this fire, these fires. So there's two kind of closer, like north, what you would call maybe like the northernest part of the state, one east of Eugene, and then another one as far as the big ones that just happen. There's other little fires, the ones that you probably would find if you go look into it. Southern Oregon by Ashland, Medford, you know what I'm saying, where people, lost 2 whole towns, you know what I'm saying? Like residential spaces burned down. Like it's not a game. Folks know that fire is an issue, is a factor of life here, but it is intensified by our climate situation. Like it being hotter and drier, than it would be or has been historically, means that when you get one, and then with the land management practices, which, and I think it's important to folks, because I've seen, one thing I can speak to, growing up next to a major highway, I've seen fires on the side of the road before in my life in the summertime in New Jersey. It don't happen often, but I've seen it, right? We don't often think of land management as like a governmental thing that's important. You know what I mean? Outside of maybe like where something is placed or where people are or are not allowed to, camp and, or set up home, so to speak. But like policy around, what happens with lands and lands that we consider public lands. And I should also make sure, because I don't want to leave out folks, understand that the majority of our federal lands and national parks are lands that actually would be used and engaged with by our indigenous brothers and sisters and folks, if not for, the activity of the United States government and or agreements that maybe were signed in treaties to stop resisting the impact of the United States government through violence. So I think people should, I encourage people to engage in, because there's a very robust dialogue about, even the idea of empty land is a construction of our society. Like, it wouldn't just like, it's not like people, they just would be, nobody would be there. Like, no, there would be people there doing their life how they do it, if not for these other rules. Right. And something that is definitely was a culture shock. I don't know if it was a shock, but a change for me or a different revelation. Because I always knew of like, I knew black people that was bikers. Like they did like long road riding and like motorcycle clubs, and they would go like to campsites to, like down south and things. But the dynamic of like whatever outdoor place as like where we go for family recreation is a very prominent dynamic, especially amongst what I would frame as my white peers, right? Where it's like, yo, we going to this forest, we going over there. I'm like, oh wow, y'all going? Oh, okay, like I didn't know this was the thing to do, and so
yeah, because you're from a place where the forest is the Pine Barrens. Yeah, I guess you didn't know.
Look, man,
and for everybody who doesn't know, because it's important to talk about this, and some people might have a different perspective. But my time going through the Pine Barrens of the state of New Jersey, which is basically between everything, a large swath of land in between South Central Jersey and the shore. And if you ever happen to get lost in the Pine Barrens, don't.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable feeling because it's relatively flat. It seems like you should be able to know where you're going, but you can't tell where you're going.
You have no idea where you're going, man.
It is sandy soil that looks like it could flood at any moment, or you could just be devoured.
Man, I had anyway. So I was messing with you. So, but I guess just in thinking just about this and the way that this has all come together, being on the ground, what would you say to people to understand like the gravity of what we see, and what are the things that we need to be thinking about going forward with this, just broadly defined?
Well, I mean, I think one is that like air quality and like how important it is actually to have good air quality, like to be able to go out, like how fragile that can be. It's been about 2 weeks, and it's like once something happens, there's not a lot. Like if there's a giant fire or anything that would be like an environmental event, I think of this nature, there's not much you can do, and there's not a whole lot of places to go. It's not like, I mean, maybe if you had the means, you could have hopped on a plane and flew out of here, like off the West Coast, right?
Right.
But it was not oh, you could just go over here. It was like, nah, man. Like, know what you could do if you're fortunate enough to have decent HVAC system in your house. Close your windows. Make sure your stuff is sealed. If you got an AC, put it on circulate like internally.
Right. Because you can't bring the air in. Right.
Because you can't just like crack a window, like, and you just got to ride it out. You know what I mean? Like, there's some other measures and some other things, like, but it is a reminder of how little you have actual control over as it pertains to our environment if it goes out of your favor, and that you just got to ride through it. So there's that piece. There's the piece about like and I'm really sincere about this, the relationships sort of between, like kind of like what you would call like, city people, urban people, and like rural spaces, because we might sometimes couch it as like a, oh well, them people don't like us or this and that, and then, or out in the country, I don't want to be out in the country. And it's like, but at some point it's like, well, some of the places I was there that are out in the country, so to speak, are places where some of your food comes from, some of the raw materials that maybe build your home or you use to repair things are coming from. And it's not actually a service to any of us to have an antagonistic relationship, because our decisions impact each other. Right? Like what happens with them. Go ahead.
I don't want to go off into this, but I think it's important just to add on to what you're saying around this idea of the feudal kind of origin of the debate between city and country.
Mm-hmm.
That really started in Europe and really even had religious overtones, right? Of like,
mm-hmm.
You look back and say, where were the pagans? The pagans were all of the country. The city people were certain people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the pagans were out there, especially like in France, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they had different value systems that then eventually religions had to start using kind of political structures to bring in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I won't talk about which holidays, but yes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, like, we've always had the city-country dichotomy and even city mouse, country mouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our family members, many of us have bought into our family members, like, the idea of the homeboy, right, was someone that was from our home, that was from our city.
Mm-hmm.
But then now, and I've been victim of it. I have been a party to this. The idea of like particular cities act country or particular, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're from the country versus seeing it as a broader relationship. But again, that's my point around when you don't have good government, when government is start working where cities see themselves as different than the country see themselves as different. And then none of us have, or the people who live in cities, largely who are impacted by what happens in the country, from food to energy creation, right? To solace, whatever, don't really have an investment in the success of the country, even though you do, right? And vice versa.
And
the people from the country don't have an actual interest. And then I'll just stop here. Politically, in a lot of states that have country or have rural areas, the rural areas, due to the idea of representation, have created outsized power.
Mm-hmm.
So they get what they want and don't have to get it from you.
Yeah.
And so, so I just, when you said that, it just really made me think about that dichotomy and how that dichotomy is not good for the state. That dichotomy is not good for the actual underpinning of the union.
Yeah, and it undermines us actually, I think, getting to solutions to some of the dynamics and the needs that we have, and including the common things that we have. Drug addiction is drug addiction for humans, no matter where you happen to be situated on planet Earth. Like, if you're addicted to meth, crack, cocaine, heroin, other opioids, alcohol, you still need treatment services, no matter where you happen to live. Right now, the politics of where you live may treat it differently. The politics of where you live may have may led to different facilities being available to you. Right, but the human need for those facilities is still the same.
Right.
And not that drug policy should guide us, but just from a human health dynamic. And it's a place where folks suffer in both places, in cities and in rural spaces, because what's available isn't adequate. Or in some cases here, which you find a lot with like youth treatment, there's these different facilities and places that are in rural spaces, and some of them work great for some of the young people when they go to them. Some of them, young people go there and they blow the doors out and they end up in the state institution because none of these places can really culturally manage with these young people. Well, at least as far as kids of color, right? So we get those dynamics. We get there's people who have invested in, this idea that we have some sort of intractable, irreconcilable differences, like the movie from the 80s. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, but we like it seems like we would have a much more sustainable and resilient society if we actually had some sort of reciprocal relationships that had some connections of mutual aid and mutual well-being tied into them. I know that could be a justice. You're asking so much of the people, justice, but I just I think like it's there.
Well, you're asking so much of the people under the premise of going back to my point. If you fail civics and you fail science, then you don't understand your broader conversation, right? And I mean, and again, Oregon, I think, is a little different, but not, different than this conversation about like a California in particular, just looking at like LA's air and the Bay Area's air and, kind of like this relationship between the forests and just the amount of green space, right? Well, I call it forest or green space or whatever have you. And how these things, like to your point, like really burn down people's houses, right? Like we watch this stuff in Malibu and Calabasas and like people's houses really get burnt down. Like $1 million houses go to zip.
Yeah, like I mean, there's one thing I will speak to is the fire don't care about your class circumstances. Like, if it's a fire, you in the jam. Now, and then there's, and the piece that I'll share, and that's an older one I hope I can find. It gets into, and before I say this, I need to say, just so also folks know, and especially is an ongoing dynamic of Western states, but also directly relates to the piece that I stated around, the United States relationship with indigenous communities and other things public policy wise. But most of the land, a lot of the land in California, even like 54% of the land is owned by the federal government. Right. And a lot of the land where some of these fires are starting and happening is federal government land. Right. So when people get into like, oh, well, the state, they didn't do this, they didn't do that with their land, it's like what's happening actually on federal land that the state doesn't get to do anything with. Right. Like getting in and understanding how all this stuff works is quite a lesson. And I would encourage folks, with related to climate change, the other dynamic is there's parts of the country that are now normally more humid and wet and other things during the summer, but the Smoky Mountains get fires too. Like there's not a where Pittsburgh sits is a place that used to have forest, could still have a forest fire. There's just not as much forest around, central Pittsburgh to just because it's a city and all that. But like the idea that this is something that, is a West Coast thing. There's mine fires across Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia and Ohio where like underground it's on fire right now. And sometimes part of that sinks and then that fire gets out and it burns, and you get grass or whatever and brush fires. Like it's not as pronounced and the circumstances don't pop up, in East Coast and Midwest cities to the same degree, and definitely not with the same level of sort of like, man, like that's a big ass fire. But it is not actually something that is outside the realm of possibility in the future. And then also, even if you put it in a different context, if you have cities that are not being cared for and you have, blighted, when I say blighted, meaning abandoned structures, all of those are fire hazard. Just because we're years away, we haven't had, a massive fire in a city, on the scale of the move.
I mean, Oakland. I mean, I would argue that Oakland Ghost Town joint or the Ghost Building.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it's death by 1,000 cuts to your point, right? Because I would argue that we just get used to a lot of homes burning down for much of the very same benign neglect. and we just normalize it. Oh man, the crib burned to the ground. And it ain't the old school, the crib burned to the ground because somebody left a pot on too late with hot dogs in it. Right? Like, that was the old school joint. Like, it was, this is like, okay, it's electrical fires because someone's living in the house and no one's come to check if the wiring's good.
Right. It's got wiring from the 50s.
It's got firing problems. So it still kind of comes back to this idea of this neglect and seeing the relationship of these things. Last point, just want to make as we transition is what's happening out there. And again, it's a nuanced and complicated thing. And then connecting that to what's happening in the Gulf Coast. Which I think is important for people. And I think, American media is so segmented, we don't get an entire story of what's happening in America. But I think it's important for folks to look at what's happening in the Gulf Coast. They've had 3 hurricanes in less than a month, right? And so we're in the beginning of hurricane season. And so for, folks in the Gulf and folks on the East, that's like, you're taking a chance going to anywhere deep in that area between now and the first week of December. Yep. Right? But you've already had 3. So what's happening in communities that have already been battered by our next kind of conversation? I just think people need to just acknowledge that climate change is not this like seeable, touchable boogeyman. It's a real collection of things that have happened over time. It's like compound interest on our environment, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not like one thing that you can point to. It's a condition, whether it's hotter and drier, whether it's rainier and more wet, whether it's the once in a lifetime stuff coming through Oklahoma and in Nashville earlier this year, right? I mean, you just have enough information to really look at it and say that, the impacts are real. That's all.
Yeah. Now, and I was just sharing closing, I think, on this something related to the question you asked us about, like, understanding that the way people are situated, socially and economically, they stand to be harmed more by these matters than those who are situated, in a different way. And that is, why these policy issues and who's involved and like what people who are going supposedly to advocate for your best interests, what they're advocating for really is important, because it could lead to, like, whether your house, here, just as an example, a big thing is with older homes not being bolted to the frame, to the foundation, and that if this super earthquake that, could happens, it's people's homes who are going to be more at risk just because of construction policy from 40 years ago or 30 years, 50 years ago. Right. Yeah. Right. So just, it's a slice. So, on a I don't know if it was a lighter note, but a different note.
I was about to say equally dark note.
Equally dark note. Basically, 6 months of this COVID life, and when we decided to like, try to record something every week and stay abreast of the world, and so I thought it would be good to like kind of go through just sort of like a look back and a look, review of these 6 months, man, and so I'll just cue it up. Maybe what's one of the points that you had in mind?
Oh man. So first thing I was thinking about just was this idea of when we first got into the stuff around COVID in particular, we were like, everyone was like, we're in the new normal, right? Mm-hmm. And I think everyone was juxtaposing the new normal versus the old normal in a way that we were going to like fundamentally change the way we saw the world, right? Mm-hmm. And that the old normal was the normal of not recognizing the impacts and not seeing the importance of collective activity, and kind of the beginning of it was kind of a kumbaya moment, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm here to say that while the old normal is not acceptable, we're going to have to be really careful being thoughtful around what the new normal means too. Mm-hmm. Because any normal has winners and losers, right? Yeah. So while you could argue the old normal, and this is just COVID and then kind of goes into other conversations, that had winners and losers. Now we've all accepted that, like, some kids ain't going to school, right? Like, kids are going to be learn stuff on a computer at least for the next 6 to 9 months, depending on where you are. Mm. That's a new normal. And that new normal has winners and losers. And I would argue that that new normal has winners and losers that are actually kind of spurred on by the old winners and losers. And so I just think when we're talking about this, in recognition that there were systemic issues doesn't mean we've shifted the activity. Like, acknowledgement doesn't mean change. And I would argue acknowledgement is necessary but insufficient. And I don't mean that as like it's necessary but insufficient. But I'm just saying it's different versus being like, oh man, it was messed up. Versus like, okay, you acknowledge it was messed up, but like, does everyone recognize what has to change? Because all the systems have to change, right? Not just the people in power, which I think is one of the things we've been working with through a couple different things this year. Everyone has to change if you want the system to be different. Not the idea of you've been hurting me, so if you change, things will be better. Or if you listen to me more, things will be better, right? Mm-hmm. Not listen, and like something we was building on, right? Not listen to us, listen to me.
Mm-hmm. Right, me.
Right?
Me.
If you listen to me about the new world, then the new world will be better. But what about the people who you didn't listen to them? And are they participating in the same way? Or are you a more enlightened version of the people who feel like they are qualified to represent the people, even if the people didn't put them there? Which I know is a challenging thing for many. But I just wanted to say, I think we got to be really careful about, because the new normal is, all right, we're having conversations about an income floor, right? Which I think, in a way, again, 9 months ago, a year ago, only certain cities were having conversations about an income floor. Now cities across the country, including Pittsburgh, I think, we were fortunate to be in on the kind of end of the first run. Shout out to Mayor Tubbs and the folks in Stockton, for including us and the folks at MGI. But we're having that conversation about this now. But let's be real. Look at the issues happening in state and federal governments. There's not some sort of coordination on thinking about an income floor for the people who are being displaced from jobs.
Mm-hmm. And there's a I mean, I was just just thinking about with that is the, like, whatever our structures are still organized around like certain ideas around like what people are, if you can't pay your rent, for most of American history, it's considered like a character flaw. Not just something to go like, well, some people can't pay some people ain't got enough money. Like they're trying, like they may be working hard and others, but they so what can we do to figure out? So it's like, oh, well, we affordable housing. Let's come up with this idea of state subsidized housing. But then, because resource certain, aspects like, look, no, everything is something that I could profit off of. So I don't want the state to be a challenge, like a competitor in the market for this. Yeah, I mean, so therefore, we, and there's also other, constructed ideas around, status and personage and self-identification or whatever. We don't, so we still have a shortage of housing, right? And I didn't get to really mention this during all this, is that, all the different lengths that folks had to go to have somewhere for those that were willing to go to get out of 450 PMI air for enough time to survive through it, right? These are choices in how we run our society that it's like, hey man, like, and I'm all for like egalitarian, like, yo man, if you just want to be an aesthetic that like, you walk barefoot through the desert, and try to find awakening, like, yo, I'm all for that. However, if you do want to go inside and you don't have the means to do it, I don't think you should be outside suffering. I don't think we should just be like, well, hey man, you could have got his high school diploma and you could have picked up a trade, and like, if you suffering with addiction or mental health or just in a bad way for whatever reason, I don't think we should just sacrifice you, right? And currently we don't, and it's the challenging thing, even in a state of, in a moment of turmoil like now, you have these things that are like people you want to change right now, and it can sound like folks are asking you to be incrementalists, right? We're like, oh well, just wait, we're gonna slow it, we're gonna do this, and it's like, well, it's like some of the things we want to do, even like if we had all of the political will, I guess we could just do it. But I don't know for sure because we don't have enough rooms or buildings or things to like put people in or do this to them. Or if we put them in that empty, well, that building's empty, put them in there. And it's like, yeah, but the part of the reason that building's empty is because it's filled with asbestos and the plumbing doesn't really work. And then like if you put people in there, then it's like you put them people in that place with the nasty mold. How could you be so inhumane? It's like, well, no, we was trying to tell y'all that building wasn't really suited for human habitation. Right, like it can become these other pieces that are remnants of past decisions or things that were intended for other uses, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's when you're the person that wants to bring that up, that like, well, there's these restrictions based on these other laws of physics or these other things, like why we can't do that this way. Not saying we can't do it, we just can't do it the way that you're asking to be done, right? That when people will go like, you're just you don't really believe in the revolution or like whatever. And I'm
well,
like, nah,
and again, that's what the change is with everybody, right? Like we all have to start. I mean, so I posted something recently. I don't want to timestamp this, but I posted something like, "Hey, when outside was open and other people let us into their countries, right?" Because I think we downplay the fact that we can't leave America right now. I mean, you can go to like renegade countries with people who've cut deals with the American government, but like you can't go to where you want to go besides probably Dubai, right? Which is probably like that in some ways. And I don't want to get jammed up for this, but the Amsterdam of like American global commerce. Like, you can go to Dubai. Everyone can go to Dubai, right? Like it's Dubai, but you can't go to Canada.
I can't go to Canada, B. Canada's right there.
Think about it. You can go to Dubai and certain countries in Africa, but you can't go to Canada, right? And so we have downplayed the fact that the rest of the world had figured out that an income floor is not only, and I'm not just using income floor for this, but just in general, that there's a social safety net that is not only morally important, but it's economically important, right? Mm-hmm. And in some strange way, the man who is currently occupying the White House got it yesterday, where he was like, I mean, we should give more money. It all comes back to the economy in some way anyway, right? So,
like, no doubt.
So the point is, a broken clock is right twice a day. Even he got the fact that if you give people the money, we have an American economy based upon consumerism. Yeah. And guess what? Poor people are not going to hold the money. Rich people hold the money. That's why tax cuts don't work, right? I mean, it's the fundamental reason why tax cuts don't work. And I mean, the big tax cuts, right? Because people who already have money, oh, you gave me some more? Cool, I'll put it over there. Poor people don't put it away. Right. Where they put it? They ain't got none.
They're like, yo, I got to pay this. Oh, word. We got this. We could do this. We can make this other move. You know what I'm saying?
And as much as we make fun of, and you know what, guy, I want to say this. I don't want to go too far off on this, but I want to say this. From a macroeconomic perspective, the fact of how much we make fun of people who go spend their tax returns is actually really silly. Yeah. Because your economy is based on our economy is based on consumerism, which we see now. So now a lot of us are complaining, I can't go to my favorite restaurant. I can't go to my favorite this. Or these people are only open right now. Yes, because no one's spending money. But in January of every year, when people spend money, right, we laugh at them. But let's make no mistake, that keeps other people employed. Some of them are your cousins.
Yeah.
That are employed because of people are spending money. So the idea of an income floor or support for people right now is not just a moral thing, which I think that we should lead with moral vision and clarity, but it's also a really clear economic vision of give people the money they need until they can get back on their feet to be able to figure out where we're going. But everyone has to understand it from a macroeconomic perspective too, not just this idea of give people stuff, but they have to spend it. Like to your point, put them in that house. Is that house okay? And if that house is not okay, then it's not okay. Right. And we have to be okay with the fact that someone might own it who may have been passed it from their families, who actually may either owe money on it or maybe using it to pay somebody else. So you can't squat in it to take it over.
Yeah.
Because there might be some other things going on with it. So that, I guess that's just my point. Not to go too deep into that, but my point is just that there are other complications that we all have to shift, and the new normal is going to take an entire societal change, not just the people you think are in power.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only point I would want to add to that, though. That thought too is just like it's in, and it kind of references back to our other thing. It's in everyone's best interest that that very few people are in such a deplorable state, right, of their life that they say, "Fuck it, fuck all this shit," right? Because like if you have when you get to a critical mass of people who are just like, yo, this thing is so wildly unfair to me that, man, so what? You know what I mean? Like, so what? Let it, I don't care. I don't care how bad it gets because it's already terrible. Like you sow the seeds of like, the end of your thing. Now, not saying that I think everything about that is a facet of our society is something that should remain. But also I do not look at or think about the idea of, 15 to 20 years of whatever forms of violence and mayhem and fighting and power struggles and or longer is some idea to romanticize. Like I've studied, going back to studying, I've studied enough about the world that sometimes it's revolutions and it just goes for 50, 60 years and no one really wins necessarily. You just have 50, 60 years of fighting. Like
right.
So just so folks, have a clear understanding. And then the other thing is like, if we have the opportunity to create a society and move the society to a place where it's like, no, we go, you know what? I think it's actually important that everybody has an opportunity to get their basic needs, man. Basic needs. Like, it ain't gonna be like, it might come with the crib, it might come with a futon. It come with a futon. It don't come with the the plush, the plush velvet top. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, yo, if you ain't got nowhere to be, we gonna let's get you in someplace. Like, I don't think that that's a bad houseless person policy. Just go, you know what would be a good idea? Let's just have somewhere. If you want it, we can put you in there. We'll get you in there within 30 days. Like, if you come in and say, I need somewhere to be and I want to be somewhere, that we go, word up, we got you. We're gonna get you plugged in.
Right.
Like it ain't even, and it's like, hey, and if you like it, you can stay as long as you want. If you don't like it, you could use it to make your move to go somewhere else that maybe you could pay for something nicer. You know what I'm saying? And not nicer in that, like, it should meet basic humane conditions and be clean and have good water and not have mold, and you should be able to close your door and feel safe that you can sleep without worrying about somebody coming through your door. Like, I just struggle where people don't see that idea is like, yeah, that's actually probably good for everybody if most people are like, I got what I need. I got some personal stuff happening. I got some stuff that I got an issue with dude from the 12th floor or whatever, or I got a problem, I got some other issues over here. But one of my issues is not that I can't eat when I need something to eat. You know what I'm saying? necessarily, or I can't sleep inside of walls that are not filled with asbestos or some other toxic substance, or what have you. So yeah, and I think that visioning of like, and it's something I would just as a. And I want you to get to another point in the last 6 months that, like, even with doing the pod, like some of I feel like some of I wonder, and I was thinking about this today because I guess we should, we could timestamp a little bit that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, just before we started recording this. Yeah. And the idea that, like, I mean, people pass. I mean, this is a major, and props and love to her. This is not me. This is not really about her necessarily, but it's about, because of our condition this year, every loss feels like elevated. I mean, it feels like it stands out more than maybe it would have in 2017 or 2014. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, oh snap! It's like, oh, it's like, damn, like I'm stuck in the house, and what I'm saying, it's a global pandemic, and what I'm saying, like, I wonder how many things in any other year we would be mournful or grieve and celebratory also, but also would be like, yo, but they got you going to wing night? You know what I'm saying? Like people would be like, yo, I'm going up to there's a new rooftop spot. You know what I'm saying? It just opened. Yeah, we should go check it out. Man.
Yeah, everything's a gut punch, right? And so I think that's the idea right now, that everything's a gut punch. Where I think everything's a gut punch, one, because you're watching TV all the time. Right? Yeah. Or you're always in the house. So yeah, everything's a gut punch when you're thinking about everything, because you don't, to your point, you don't have the other stuff to do so that you don't think that everything is a gut punch, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think it's the kind of, how can I say this? You got me saying all kind of politically correct stuff tonight. I think it's the thing of shared trauma. And here's what I'll say. From my vantage point, the death of, Judge Ginsburg is horrible from my political perspective. But I've seen 20 pictures of her as the notorious RBG, just a whole host of stuff, right? To the point where I've argued, how many people have thought about her jurisprudence over time? Now, again, if I was to compare her to Scalia, or if I was to compare her to some other people, I get it, right? Mm-hmm. But did you agree with her jurisprudence? Did you agree with her reasoning for her jurisprudence?
Have you read
any of her dissents?
Dissents, yeah, absolutely. Like, don't. Like, I mean, like, on one hand, dig it, but like, if you ain't never really read none of them, like none, don't be posting no picture about her.
Do you know who was clerk? Are you saying she had like great people that clerked for her that now are judges, right? I mean, again, there's in the political world, there's a whole bunch of spaces that you could kind of think about why somebody would honor someone. But I need to know why you're like that. Not because I don't respect her and honor her as Supreme Court judge, and not because I don't understand the idea of what Mitch McConnell is about to go do. Not what Donald Trump's about to go do. This is about Mitch McConnell, which goes back to this conversation about power in the Republic, right? Because in the Republic, when the senators, everybody gets the same votes. You know what I mean? And so it puts everyone on the same level in a way different way. So anyway, I just think, we need to have that conversation, because without it, we're just like, okay, we're passing trauma to each other, and everyone's going to post the same 4 pictures of her with a Biggie crown, or you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we're passing this trauma with each other, which is also part of this time that we're learning to pass trauma, right? And we've seen it so much with so many other videos. The other thing that I've really been thinking about for the last 6 months is, the last 6 months has shown me that nothing exists in a silo, right? So my point is, we came into this, and some people in our government said this was a China virus, which totally obscured the fact that the cities and states that got the most harmed by this and the immediate, kind of onslaught or onset, got it through Europe.
Yep.
Right? Because we were so busy calling it an Asian virus that we forgot that it mutated in Europe and got to the East Coast.
Yep.
So we didn't know which one we were getting over this side, while everyone's looking at, oh wow, it went to Washington first. Oh, now it's in Oregon. Yeah, you had one of them, but we had the mutated version. We had the remix. Right?
It went hard.
The remix did numbers, just like Diddy. The remix did numbers. The original might have been whatever, but he made the remix, you know what I'm saying, work. So we got this, and then and everyone's like, "Ooh, who's going to get sick?" And then you start being like, "Oh, who's getting sick?" Hey, this is a disease, a virus rather, that actually makes people sick who are already sick. Well, wow, who's already sick? Really old people, really sick people, black people, brown people, right? Like people who live close to each other, and that we ignore that are always sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
We ignore the fact that people in many of these cities and towns, the indigenous nations, right? Mm-hmm. The native nations, not just people, but they're actually nations. They got their own land and they got their own stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they're the people who are often sick, but they're obscured from our vision. And so these are the people who are getting more sick than when everyone's like, ooh, oh, wow, we didn't know that was the case. Well, you didn't know that was the case because, these folks also are suffering from all the other social determinants of health and are negatively impacted by that. Oh, and they're also the people that get stopped by the cops and killed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So and they're also the people who are the first to lose their jobs because they work, kind of service jobs, where a lot of us, you and I included, have the benefit of working from home.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people do we know that don't have the benefit of working from home?
Yeah.
Right? And so how many people that look like us don't have the benefit of working from home? How many people did you serve? How many people that I have to think about don't have the benefit of working from home? Right? So I just think one thing I come from this is nothing is in a silo, man. The problems of this country and of this society and of this world, because it's also global. I mean, global capital moves how global capital moves. And actually, outside of a couple things, individual countries' issues don't really change the global capital flow, generally speaking. Mm. But these things are not in silos. So the problems of our community are not just police violence. Right? The problem of our community doesn't get, and I'm going to say this, the problem of our communities don't get solved by getting rid of police. Because police are the last bastion. They are the last frontier of the concerns around our public safety and quality of life. Mm-hmm. They're not first. And I'll argue that with anybody. They're not first.
I see that.
They're the end game. They're the immediate violence. There's violence happening to us from people who look like us because of the economic systems that create conditions that foster those things. There are people who are dying before their time because we have created systems that don't allow people to get the proper medical treatment, right? There's a whole bunch of deaths that happen, right, that everyone gets comfortable with. If they happen in my family, they've happened in your family. So it doesn't matter even the conversation around what we all know, right? In this context. Mm-hmm. It's people and everybody we know that have, quote unquote, died before their time because of the social determinants of health. And most of them, frankly, being honest, weren't killed by the police. Yep. Now, they were impacted by the police, but they were impacted by the police because we're over police because of the idea of criminality, which emanates out of the economic system that so many of us find ourselves in. And when you got rid of other systems, the prison industrial complex was created in a post-industrial American society. Mm-hmm. And so I think we just have to have an interesting conversation in the Black community, not alone in the Black community, because Black people alone are not responsible for Black people's problems. But also, when we talk about going and talking about our challenges, we don't need to talk about it in an isolated way, because you get to a stalemate that those who don't want to make those changes, they can't wait to watch us get stuck in a stalemate.
Right. And I think it's really important to elevate that when someone that wants to maintain the status quo, the most important the thing they want you to do is stall out. They don't actually need to like implement a countermeasure. Right. They're about to do this next thing to you. Like, no, they just need you to stall out on the thing that would force them to have to adjust by the way that you're organized or the way that you're situated. So it's like, so I can imagine those persons look forward to like a group of people who may be organizing around, around police and state sanctioned violence, and a group that's organizing around housing, and then coming to opposing point of views and going like, oh man, like great. Because that means both of them are not really going to maybe get where they want to go. Which means that in the meantime, whatever exists is going to keep going. because the way the world works, you end up having to deal with what you got to deal with presently. And as I shared earlier in some of our conversations over these 6 months, is like, as entropy slows things down and other things happen and other circumstances happen, like how focused will people be on what they want to see changed? And it also always starts to reveal the different places where, and I think it's poignant that you brought up no silos, like where the power to change things that are happening around you exists, and what are the different places. You know what I mean? Some of those things are definitely right in the hand of a local official. Some of those things are in a national, state level or federal level. Some of them are in private business. Some of them are in attitudinal discretion, of the officers that happen to be around you. Some of it is also in what your neighbors is up to, what their plans are about life and how they see things. Some of it's up to real estate law. Like, it's all these other places where power that in decisions around what happens and how you experience life are made and being made, that are not all like these easy to grab and you can just point to this and do it differently. And there's a large space. It's not the only space, right? Because we need other systems to align with, but there's also a large space for how you try to organize yourself and situate yourself, against whatever those entities or those energies are. And it is the, I would say one of the most challenging, realities of humanity is like, if you have a flood of humans doing things this way, and then you're like a human that wants to go that way, you're going to wrestle with the people when you're trying to go the other way. And you're also going to wrestle with all the stuff that comes with the people that is organized and designed and fitted to suit the other way. You know what I'm saying? Right. So, if you are trying to get more people into a neighborhood and it's all like single family, 2-bedroom cribs, and you trying to find a way to like make it hospitable for more folks and not have, but also, make the neighborhood itself work and the rules and how someone owns it. It's like, oh man, like, so wait, you telling me I can't just do this? It's like, well, you can't do this because if you put this covenant in and this other rule around basements, you can't put an apartment in. But like, what if I just have an apartment but I don't tell nobody? Like, well, I'm not going to ask your business. Just don't have any complaints that lead to somebody inspecting the crib. Like, it becomes all these other weird things where people are trying to find a way to do what they want to do and meet their needs, but then there's like factors that like someone may find themselves in a position where it's like, damn, like these people aren't bad people, but also I work here, and unfortunately this is what I gotta go I gotta go, do a house inspection, or I gotta, that's your water. If you people go buy a crib and you find out there's some weird room in the house because people built some shit, outside of code, which is fine
Right.
if they want to live in it. But now when you're trying to fix it, you're like, what the hell was they doing in here? Right? Like
Right.
these are, that, and that can be sort of like a trivial thing, but it's a real thing. And then it's like, then when we get into thinking about the things that serve where you live and place and space, and like how much where you are and where you're from not can be a part of your identity. Like you just got a lot of factors that require, in my eyes, a conscientiousness. They require a level of focus. And as we talk about, well, what would be the, if the present infrastructure points you to live a way that isn't really in line with what your needs are telling you, how do we get those two things to find equilibrium in a way that is most mutually beneficial to the people that want the change? And to me, that's like the fundamental thing that we end up wrestling with. You know what I'm saying? When we start talking about gentrification and displacement, like, yes, we're also talking about these economic factors. We're talking about, the legacy of past decisions, right? That were explicit about like, hey, we don't want these people by those people. So the easiest way we can influence the behavior is put like, yeah, if you buy a house over there, it's not going to be worth nothing. And we won't, and further, we won't let you use the tool to buy it over there. So therefore, you just effectively, unless you just got a whole lot of independent bread and you coming in with 30 stacks cash, you probably not buying no crib over there. You sure as hell ain't fixing it up. Unless you happen to have a family member that's handy, right? That's got trade skills, so they could do it themselves if they could buy it. But again, like it's these cascading set of circumstances that are created, by the conditions that people have been put into, not necessarily, by a clear Orwellian like presence, but a very Orwellian outcome in that it puts you in a bad spot just trying to like take care of yourself, right? And so then if you as our community, you emerge in this age from that history, and you're like, well, look, man, we still, we pretty sharp and we want to do these other things, and then you start running into like all kinds of new weird, oh, so you're not a cultural fit for this agency, or like, like I said, I would be thinking about how there's certain dynamics, and even for me, someone that's worked in nonprofits and community things most of my life, outside of a stint in customer service, and then some other little jobs here and there. There's a whole world of working in like a Fortune 500 company. I have no personal experience with. Right. But for thousands of people, all of those norms and expectations and practices are just a part of their thing, right? So they're, they're home right now, working from home for the first time, finding out how bad their kids is. You know what I'm saying?
Ooh.
They like, and they're like, man, or, which is probably also a dynamic figure. People realizing that they really liked each other when they wasn't seeing each other all day, every day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Woo.
Because again, our structures are, and that goes to the new normal, right? Our structures were based upon certain premises, so we organize a lot of behavior based on those premises, which, the philosophers amongst us and the activists amongst us should want us to look a little deeper, right? But now we have a whole bunch of new ones, and the question is, should you see somebody all the time? I'm not even, you know what I mean? Like, is that the right way to live? That there's no distance? Is that what makes a relationship? Because honestly, some people are going to flourish, some people are not, right?
Yeah.
Just like in the old way, right? Some people flourished and some people didn't. So it's like one of those conversations of like, what do we want? But going back to your point about Jackson Rising and so much stuff, the we is important. The royal we. Not the theoretical we, not the intellectual we, right? But the organizing we, the engaging we, to actually think about democracy as far as creating a republic, right? So, again, and I think these things are important. You know what I mean? Because obviously we have so many challenges. So we really have 3 challenges, right? We have the health challenge that still hasn't gone anywhere because, y'all having parties and stuff and still won't let me out the country. so I can't go to other cool places in the world because, Americans can't control themselves, right? Then obviously there's the latent and actual shocks and stressors of racism and white supremacy and structural kind of benefit that white people and people with money derive just by the nature of our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, so then you have those. Then you have the economic tsunami that has emerged out of kind of all of this, right? So you have these like 3 different things that have converged at one time to be able to impact people. And if you just had one of them, maybe we could talk through it and write a couple articles and, do some Nike ads. Shout out to Nike, but, let us know. Just out here pounding the pavement. I'm running these miles, so whenever you're ready, get busy. Pedigree run crew. Just come on, just bring it on in. But like,
come on home.
Come on, bring it on in, man. But you know what I'm saying? Like, one of them would have been sufficient for some of the performances, right? But 3 of them, no, you got to evaluate a lot of stuff. But then you got to evaluate it and say, and you're not responsible to solve 500 years worth of problems in 30 days. You're responsible to think about the macro, micro, economic impacts of what's occurring. We are all responsible for that. You're not responsible to make it good and erase the harm, but we are responsible to be thoughtful. So this 6 months has been really challenging, but also to be square with you. For me, it's been good. And I don't mean good in the way that obviously people mean winners and losers good. It has slowed the world down for me that a lot of the assumptions that I always made about how things were functioning were no longer functioning. Mm-hmm. So then I had to engage other things in my own world. I had to start saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to go run. Why? Because I can't go to the gym, right? It started as something very fundamental. Can't go to the gym. Gyms are closed. So you got to go run. And then once the gym opened, I didn't really want to go to the gym because it's a gym. And so, but from that, I've now learned to love running. You know what I mean? And just want to do it. And just like get out and move for an hour and a half. Like, when would I have done that? Like I even looked at people who did that as kids and like, oh man, y'all running too long. I'm trying to run for like between 11, 22 or 49 seconds. That's it. The 1 to 2 or the 4. Where now it's like I might run for an hour and a half and be like, oh man, this is amazing. This is great. Right? So it's a meditation. But I also know that there's a privileged perspective to be able to engage the world in a way that I did, So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the thing I'll add is, and pivoting towards that note that everything that folks are experiencing that are more acutely going wrong are things that were problems already. They were not things that were not problems.
Well said, Lord.
Right? They was already there. Just less people either were experiencing them, less people were experiencing them, and or less people were being able to be made aware about the people who were experiencing them and how horrendous it is, how horrendous it was or is. Big and trying to speak of the past and the present at the same time, or the future, right? And and it can be difficult in these things because there's people that are, I imagine for many well-meaning police officers, they're like, damn, and it's like, nah, be like, this ain't necessarily about you, but it's a reality of your profession. And I said on this podcast, we could start the clock when the next was going to happen, and the doggone it did not 3 months later, right? It's already the issue is already in the works. The fires we experienced, the climate damage has already happened, right? You ain't felt the effect yet. You know what I'm saying? In some years you might get spared, right? So some years you don't get a big, we don't get the fire that we got this year in 2 weeks of being basically having to be in the crib. And then it happens. And what are you going to do? You don't get, you growing up and living on the East Coast, especially in New Jersey, but having relations in the Southeast, some years you can get through without getting hit by the hurricane. Ain't hit here, and hurricane ain't hit here in 15 years. But this your year,
right?
Right? Like this is your year. You know what I'm saying? And when we get to the dynamics of people's living conditions, right? The trade-off in a lot of part of our society, we say that, if you have more economic privileges and whatever, you can get a bigger house, or, and if you have less, you got to do it a smaller place, a smaller home, and for whatever that means. And you may have to put more people in a smaller home. Well, with that comes all of the potential risks of, if you ask a question like, is that optimal for 8 people to be in a 2-bedroom crib of whatever kind? You know what I'm saying? Is there a reasonable trade-off, that, and it's not to say that people, when people might have a lot of kids, or they may have all kinds of reasons. If they want to live tight, that's their prerogative. But if they, as a family, would we would actually like a little more space between us, but just our economics and dynamics, we don't have the means to do it to get there, right? Do we have some responsibility to each other to say, how can we ensure that whatever people's living conditions, whatever their life situation is something that is more of their choice and more than of this is just their circumstance, and they just they got to ride that out. And I advocate the reality of people understand the natural consequences of decisions, and then also with that, bear in mind that the choices that people make they're never from a place where they always just have sort of this objective opportunity to I could go do this other thing. It's like sometimes nah, this is the lot that you in, and you just trying to deal. You got these cards and you trying to play these cards. You know what I'm saying? I've been playing electronic spades on my phone.
Right.
And it remind me, sometimes you get a hand, it's a lot of cards, but they all stink. All of these cards is whack. Can't do nothing with these cards, man. I can't even go nil right. You know what I'm saying? This is, and this is what this time I think, has brought to the front for people. And and to me, it's within the pain and the hardship is also the opportunity to engage the issues that are underlying these outcomes, hopefully, right? And if people are bold, people are focused, people push, people are willing to open up and say, hey man, well, let's talk about how we can get our block straight, or how our church could do something different, or how our church can help, or how our temple could help, or let's see how our organization, that maybe we always done this, but man, maybe we really should be doing that. Right? Or this, whatever your entity that can make some kind of impact that is not just you, because our society's fascination with the individual responsibility to change everything is misguided, right? You can see that also with our current issues with recycling, where since China doesn't want to buy our plastic anymore, a whole lot of plastic that used to get recycled is just going in the trash, right? But we staked the whole, people agreed on a whole campaign to be like, oh, it's like personal, like recycling is like personal responsibility. Like, no, recycling it's a finite planet, dog. We only got one of these. Until y'all get this whole spaceship thing figured out, we only got one planet. So, and most of us ain't gonna get, my number is at least 500 years. So there's like a real, you could like leave in space and like be up out of here, and that's if that's possible. That's my number. You know what I'm saying? It's like 500 years probably. So, yeah, I mean, like this, and the stuff that we've talked about, what I mean, has been, we've tried to have fun and try to remind people that, like, amidst all this hard stuff and heartache, like you still gotta smile, you gotta crack, you gotta have jokes, you gotta, listen to good music, what I mean, go have a nice meal. Like still find, and then like, if you got a family, have fun with your family, man. Like if you got kids, man, go do something fun with your kids. Up being old grumpy McGrump. You know what I'm saying? Go do something nice with your partner. You know what I'm saying? Go like, watch a movie together or something. You know what I'm saying? Find something don't be imbalanced. You know what I'm saying? I guess is my general thought.
Because nobody wins anyway, and so much. And I'll stop here. So much of our society is based upon us being imbalanced. There's so many components of our society that actually function because we're imbalanced with each other and ourselves. Mm-hmm. That outside of obviously activating to think about the broader things in the world, some of the number one things we can do is actually shift how we shift our perspective and how, if you want the economy, because the economy, if anything that I know about being plant-based for all this time, the economy will eventually respond if there's enough money in it. Now, you may like that or may not like that idea, right?
Yeah.
But the economy will respond. The economy has not responded to plant-based foods because they don't want to eat. They want to give grass eaters the the opportunity. They've done it because there's money in it. Yep. And we should just be clear about that, right? So there is a part of changing your personal behavior does change the broader society, right? Mm-hmm. There is part of that I think we need to underscore sometime in ways that we don't. Because sometimes it's easier just to be like, no, it's about the collective. Yes, but a whole bunch of us collectively, this deciding how we spend our money has a broader vision.
Yeah. Well, it goes to like, I guess a reference to what I was saying before is like a bunch of y'all have to agree, which means y'all have to get into the same idea. Like y'all both got to go like, you know what, it is good that I eat vegetables, and you know what I'm saying, and I eat more of them, like fresh ones, and I cook them. Even if I still eat a little bit of meat, I should eat a good bounty of fresh vegetables. Like I shouldn't have like my plate is 4 types of brown, 3 of which are a processed chip of some kind. You know what I'm saying? It's like you gotta get some veggies in there, man, some fruits in there. You know what I'm saying? Mix that bad boy up, man. Maybe skip a meal. You know what I'm saying? Have some juice. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's opportunities out here to mix up how you take care of yourself. And we just, but that's what we are. I guess you could say we are all in the business of, so to speak, and saying, hey, man, there's other ways you could approach this thing called life. You want to check some of them out.
And that's right. And you could get off the grid on some of them. Some of them you stay on the grid. But that's the broader thing I've taken out of this, because I've gone on the grid about something. Like I ain't running bare feet, right? So I've gone on the grid about spending a certain amount of money on shoes and things to actually perform the thing I want to do well. But I've also seen the benefits of what it means to invest in myself doing well. And what does it mean when we broaden that out? What does it mean we give, again, going back to the income floor? Stockton, holla at me. We doing good today. But like, you know what I'm saying? What does it mean to give people the money to invest in things that they think are important? Right? Like, because the idea is, okay, well, we can't trust you, so we'll just give you food stamps, right? I mean, think about that.
Right. So that this way you can only spend it on food. You can't use it on your shit.
Not realizing that what they're going to do is stand and create some sort of third party economy where $100 in stamps is $70 in cash.
Right.
Right? Like, people are resilient. So my point is, like, the same space that we giving people to people like myself have been able to reframe stuff. We need to give every member of our society the possibility to do the same thing if we're thinking about the success and future of us as a whole. So I'm done there.
Word up. Well, I think that's a solid review.
Oh man, I think it's an extremely solid review, and again, shout out to all those who are feeling the impacts of what I'm going to call the two-headed dragon of climate change and lack of accountability on the federal level.
Absolutely, and I mean, with that, I'll just close with, man, like, hey, check the links when I post some. If you want to, if I post a couple things, folks to contribute to. But also, man, don't be bashful. Feel free to reach out into the world and look around for things where you could, if you could put a little money on somebody's situation. And also where, and we in the election seasons, man. Get involved, get engaged, fam. I ain't telling you who to pick or none of that. I mean, I guess I could, but I mean, even let you make your own decisions. But more than half of the people don't really be voting.
Listen,
so
the fact that you're right, the fact that I just want to say this true. In any world where 30% of the people decide the outcomes for 100% of the world, we call that the fix.
Yeah.
So why is it not the fix in American politics? And I'm done.
Yeah. So, just to say, get in the game, right? You miss all the shots you don't take, my man. So, with that, I'm going to say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my brother, I'm Majestic. Much love to all the families, communities, people across Oregon, across Washington, California, anywhere else, impacted and harmed by these fires. I put some links in the show notes for some of the places you can go to if you want to donate something or put something on this situation. Thank you to you, the listener. Been a wild month. October is going to be something special, though. We're going to be ratcheting up the consistency and the frequency and various other things be on deck. You can support the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast and the Ask Your Oldhead Family of Podcasts. There's Good Brothers and more to come at Patreon. Just look up Ask Your Oldhead or Justice Rajee. You can find me on the internets anywhere as Justice Rajee. Also Good Brothers Pod on Instagram. Shoot us a message if you like what you hear. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be found on the internet. All of the platforms, all of the tools. So please search us out, listen, share with someone else. Thank you again. Be safe. Peace.